ねえったら
ジョージ
早くやろうよ。
うるさいなもう負けたんだから黙っててよ。
I'm literally gonna wait for you. And I see you're gonna be like, nah, I'm not gonna like it. I'm just keep watching.
Just subscribe.
And you think the clip gonna cut right here, but it's not because I'm still waiting for you to click that like button. And the subscribe and the post notification button.
What does it take to break wind? It's something that seems so simple to talk about because it's basically really easy to let go, but it's really hard to keep in. I spent years trying to find an anime to teach me how to break wind, and I couldn't find anyone until this season showed up. And honestly, I found an anime that changed my life and taught me to break wind with the best of them. And I'm not even gonna hold it anymore. I'm just gonna let it out.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Introducing Windbreaker.
No! No! No!
Jokes aside, it's not about windbreaking, but basically, let's actually really start with the anime Windbreaker. The thing about Windbreaker is that, well, for me to tell you about Windbreaker, I have to tell you about Windbreaker. So essentially, Windbreaker follows a character called Sakura. Now, Sakura is a pretty interesting character because he's a guy and he's called Sakura, but Sakura shows up and he seems to have one mission in mind. He wants to be the strongest character because allegedly in his school, it's a school filled with the most strongest individuals in terms of fighting. Now, at this point, I kind of had this suspicion that Sakura would be really OP because his hair is half white and half black or gray or silver, I don't know, but a person like that is not normal. Now, my assumption was he probably has powers, and when he loses his mind, all of his hair probably goes white and he's gonna be OP. Only to find out that a few minutes into the anime, they were just fighting. It was just street fighting the whole time, no powers, no nothing. But after having a few fights in which a character pulled out a knife, which is lame, Sakura then meets Borofin. Now, Borofin is different in that Borofin is an organization that comes from a high school, but for some reason they're tasked with protecting the people?
What?
So basically for Sakura, he meets these individuals whose job is to protect everybody in the community from bad guys, but for some reason they all go to high school, which is pretty weird to me because why are you asking a bunch of high schoolers to protect a bunch of adults? I don't know, but for some reason that happened. So after meeting Borofin, Sakura immediately realizes that they're really OP because when he got into a fight, he saw just how strong these people are. So now he eventually goes to, well, his school. Listen, I'm gonna try and explain the story as best as I can, but I mean, like, it's not the most complex story, so it's kind of simple. I'm kind of dragging it, but nah. So basically he goes to this high school and he finds out that they're not that bad of a school, in that you would have thought that the school would be filled with a bunch of delinquents who are, well, evil, in that they would just do a bunch of bad things, only to find out that Borofin is actually an organization that is pretty good, and all of the characters within there seem like good people, which confuses Sakura because he's basically been set up in his mind that he's gonna fight his way to the top and these people are bad guys, only to find out that they're pretty cool, and before he knows it, he's kind of part of the team.
What?
But then later onwards, what happens is that they end up being challenged by another gang. Yeah, they're school gangs, you know how it is in high school, I guess.
Here we go again.
That is essentially the premise of the anime. Sakura just wants to become the most strongest character ever, but it seems like he might not need to fight his way to the top in his high school because for some reason at his high school, the leader is really nice. Fun fact, the leader of the high school looks like a younger version of Gojo, but he's actually voiced by the guy who does Gojo. But anyway, after basically giving you this really confusing premise of an anime and trying to make it sound deep, you probably want to know what makes this anime special, because because if it's just a bunch of high schoolers fighting, you could find that on YouTube. What you're gonna get with this anime is essentially something different, because for one, it's already broken the rule of delinquency in that you had this character who was set in his mindset that he's just gonna fight everybody and that he's a lone wolf and that he's totally different, which seemed really cool at the start, but then once you realize the type of people he have to fight, you then realize that he looks like a loser because he would literally be picking a fight with people who protect the community. It's kind of weird. So with that by itself, you see that this anime has a pretty interesting perspective on a character who wants to gain power and find his way to the top of a school, which is a pretty interesting perspective on the whole delinquency era type of thing, because before it was just senseless violence, but now he can't do that. And even when he gets into fights with other gangs, it's not necessarily senseless, it's always for a good reason. And this is really weird because it's not an anime about heroes, but for some reason they are heroes to the community. Ultimately, they're just a bunch of high schoolers who like to get into fights but just so happen to be good, and other gangs happen to be weird at times. No one is necessarily evil, to be specific. So now this anime then basically gives you a different perspective on delinquency, but also shows you a good side of delinquency, in that it doesn't mean if you enjoy fighting that you're just this weird evil person. It just means you like fighting, and also I mean they're in high school, so let them fight, I guess. So this kind of gives this anime a really unique perspective, but the thing that makes this anime shine the most is essentially the fighting. Because there's a lack of powers, seeing them go at it is pretty amazing, because I've never really seen an anime really dive into fighting in such a simple but realistic way. The way they fight, you could see someone in the streets actually fighting that way. It's not that crazy, but the way it's so well animated, you actually enjoy the fights because you feel like you're watching them. Again, this kind of feels illegal because I'm basically talking about enjoying watching high schoolers fight.
Police department, search warrant! Police department, search warrant!
It's just interesting to watch them fight because you feel like you're right there, and if you actually saw people fight like that, you wouldn't actually believe that it was fake. You would actually think it was real, which kind of makes this anime shine out because of that whole ability of it taking you into a fight and really making you feel like this is a realistic fight. They use everything, kicks, punches, they will grab someone, they will slam. Like, it's not this sort of formal way of fighting, they're genuinely fighting. But also the interesting aspect about these fights is that of course there has to be some sort of background stories on the characters, and you learn a few things about these characters when they get into fights, which is pretty interesting because you learn more about these characters who seem like they're good people, but you want to know why they're good people, and also how did they get so strong.
Come here!
An interesting thing that High School Gojo said is that he told Sakura that when he gets into a fight, it's basically like a conversation.
You got something to say too? You got something to say? You still want something.
legally obligated to tell you.
And it's kind of an interesting way to basically say whenever you fight, it's time for background story time. But with the good comes the bad, because like I said, it's pretty simple. There's not too much to write home about these characters, because I mean, we're pretty far into the anime so far, and there hasn't been too many stories that have kind of left me feeling a real connection with certain characters, especially some of the bad guys. I got some of the stories, but ultimately after they were packed up, I did not care anymore. But also, another glaring issue with this anime is that the world just feels so empty and only centered around the characters that you kind of realize that they put all of the focus on the characters, but the world feels empty. I mean, just put a guy who doesn't even have a face. There's not even like stray cats at times. The streets just feel empty. Wherever they're at, things happen, but wherever they're not, nothing happens. But I also think the fact that the coloring at times is really gray and dreary really reminds you that no one is here. And I get the whole premise that certain places are filled with bad guys, but I mean, they're high schoolers. Like, is everybody pressed by a bunch of high schoolers that they stay indoors like that? Come on. And also the places where they protect these individuals, yeah, it has life. I enjoy that. But are you telling me the entire city or that area only has life in that one point where they're protected? Like, there's scenes where these, again, high schoolers are passed out on the ground and no one sees them. Give me a lady who's shocked when they see a kid literally passed out in the rain. Give me something. But it doesn't really have that. But then again, I'm not an animator, so I probably shouldn't judge that deeply. But at the same time, if they do move forward with a season 2 or whatever, they should do that so that the world can feel more impactful. So there's a lot of things that this anime can fix, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that it's a good anime. It still has interesting aspects to it, especially with action that keep you hooked. But the weaknesses show itself over time because when they don't fight, it feels like a dreary episode, which kind of shows that they still haven't fleshed out the world entirely or the story enough for you to really care about the characters just talking. So this anime has a long way to go. It's a good enough anime to actually watch. It's got something about it, and I'm not talking about High School Gojo. It's got something about it that is interesting. I just think that it's an anime that needs more time, but for now, it's just gonna be classed as a good anime.